Tucson, Arizona, in the United States, in the desert, actually. So not an area with a lot of water. But I was always interested in environmental issues, even as a kid. None of my parents are scientists. And I didn't really know it was an option to be a scientist growing up, but I did know that I was interested in the environment. I did some volunteer work for a recycling group, Keep Arizona Beautiful, which is part of Keep America Beautiful as a kid, and I loved it. But when I went to university, I really didn't know that like I said, that this type of job was a career. So I actually changed my major a lot of times, switched universities, but ended up in California, took a class in marine biology, loved it, and never looked back. So from there forward, I changed my major. I started taking other courses in marine science, working in the laboratory of a woman named Lisa Levin, who was a great mentor and inspiration for me. And as I started to learn that a career like this was possible, I started to chase it. So early people of inspiration for me, scientifically, would be Dr. Lisa Levin at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. My marine biology professor, Dr. Garen Bagdasarian, who was at Santa Monica College. And then I was really inspired, I'd say, like in terms of famous people, was Rachel Carson and the work she did to realize that there were toxic contaminants out there in the environment that we were using sometimes for good things, but that had unintended consequences on biodiversity. And I wanted to know how other contaminants like plastic pollution could have unintended consequences on marine and freshwater biodiversity. Yeah, so the research I do today is mostly from like the purely natural scientist position that I sit in, and then I'll talk about what I do in terms of the human dimension and social science. But in my research lab, we look a lot about how plastic pollution, and mostly the small, less than 5 millimeters in size microplastics, how they get into the environment, how they move about it, how they get eaten by organisms, and how they move from prey to predator through food webs, and the impacts that it has on them and their ecosystem. And I'm really interested in those like big scientific questions, both applied and basic, that are relevant to that. But when I became a scientist, I also wanted to be a scientist because I felt strongly that facts should inform solutions. And at the time, 15 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information on plastic pollution. And so there weren't a lot of scientific facts to inform solutions. So when I finished my PhD, I really hummed and hawed about, do I want to become a scientist forever? Do I want to use what I know to go try to inform change? But I love working at a university. I love mentoring. I like doing the research. So I started with a couple of friends, the U of T Trash Team, which is a community organization where we work in the university, but also in the community with youth, and youth in this sense being like undergrads and graduate students. So I think the definition of youth, and you may know this better than me, I think it's like 19 to 29 or something as the age group I'm talking about here. And we work with them to work within the community on solutions. And so that includes educational and school programs that we take into schools. We try to target model schools, which are lower income communities, but we go into all schools that are interested in having us. We do projects on like community outreach and public education. And all of the research that we do within the trash team is really solutions based. So some of it includes social science, trying to understand what the community understands about waste and how we can increase waste literacy to improve behaviors that are more sustainable, or to kind of create more sustainable behaviors among society. We have social science research running alongside our school programs to make sure that that information is sticking, and to see if it's not, think about how we can improve them and learn what the kids are taking home to their parents and the behaviors that they're having and changing. And then we also do some projects where we work with diverse stakeholders. So we work with people from industry, we work with partners from government, we work with partners from NGOs and those types of things. So I think within the U of T trash team, it's where we really try to move what we learn in the lab out into the field and try to gain more literacy around those like really applicable questions to try to create solutions that work. And a lot local, because when you work at the local level, you really get the human dimension. I don't remember how many years ago this was. probably 5. We brought together a group of stakeholders to think about the issue of microplastics coming from our clothing that go through our washing machine and end up in the Great Lakes or end up in the ocean. So we brought together industry members who make washing machines and appliances. We brought together industry members that make clothing, government representatives, NGOs, and researchers. And we probably spent half of the day talking about and we kept saying microfibers, and we're talking about microfibers coming from the wash, and how if we just put filters on washing machines, and we had tested them in our lab as one of our first trash team projects, like science-based solutions project, and we found that these filters reduce the amount of plastic microfibers by like 90%. So you can really make a difference. And finally, the guy from the washing machine industry said something about dryer lint. And he said it as though it was something different. And I was like, wait, we're talking about the same thing. When I say microfibers, I mean laundry lint. And he was like, oh, I had this realization of like how important it is to communicate, to meet people where they are, right? And communicate with people in a way where like you're speaking like their language, so to speak, right? And ever since that moment, I felt like that was a breakthrough, and a lot of companies have been working on how to make filters for washing machines. And there's bills that are now running through Ontario, for example. There's an MP interested in it in a federal level. There's some in the US, one in Paris. So I'm not going to say like we told the industry like that they should make this difference, because they also were opposed to it because it's a big change in their industry. But it was really this aha moment of how important it is to meet people where they are, and kind of talk to them on a personal level. I didn't grow up in a family that had like, some had gone to college, some hadn't gone to college. Being in academia wasn't like something that we really thought about. It was more kind of this idea like get a job to be secure monetarily, and be able to like raise a family and be stable, which is a really great goal, obviously. But also I had this real drive to like, I wanted to do something I loved. But I think there's 2 types of people. Well, there's probably more than 2, but there's the kind that like know what they want to do early on. And there's like whatever they wanted to do when they were 7 is what they wanted to do. And then there's those of us that like are interested in so many things and could probably be happy doing many things, as long as it maybe fit like a particular theme. And I don't mean a theme like plastic pollution. I mean a theme like working with people to make things better, or like something broad. And so I changed my major a million times and really was flailing because I couldn't quite find the thing that fit. And that meant that I wasn't doing as well in school because I wasn't like, I would feel like I was a salmon swimming upstream. So I think for me, the thing that clicked was having the right teacher that taught me the thing with enthusiasm, that like I really had that aha moment. And when I first went to university, I went to University of Arizona. It's a big school. You're easily like a small fish in a big pond. But when I moved to California, I went to a junior college and I was in a classroom of 30 people. My teacher knew my name, and he was taught, like he didn't also have a research program on the side. And so I just had such a great experience at Santa Monica College, and I loved that class. So I guess the short answer to your question is mentors. I don't know that I can say before I got to Santa Monica College that I felt like I had a mentor. Yeah. Throughout, so when I was growing up, I was a big swimmer. So I grew up on swim teams. And once that was even like kind of the other thing that I really felt like it was for me and I loved it and I still do it today. And exercise for me has always been one thing that's grounding. So swimming, like being underwater, I don't know why. It's peaceful, it's quiet, it's good. It's makes your breathing like purposeful. That's one thing. But the second thing is talking to people. And I will say that from a young age and for many years, I had like counselors that I would talk to. And I wouldn't call them mentors because they were like, they were just people that I went to who were like basically paid to talk to me for an hour. But it was really helpful. And I think the lesson there is taking the time to get to know yourself. I had a lot of this like me time where I got to get to know myself and work through things. And I think I grew a ton from that and gained a lot of emotional intelligence and allowed me to kind of think about it. I also think that I'm like optimistic sometimes to a fault. And that kind of kept me going because I was like, I can get myself out of this and like figure out what it is that I want to do. But I can tell you that like going on that journey and really talking to as many people as you can and finding it. And then once you find it, then I felt like I was swimming on the right stream and I just like kept working harder to kind of get to the next level. But mostly these days, freshwater. My PhD is in marine ecology. I started my work in the middle of the ocean in the garbage patches and learning that most plastic comes from land. It's a lot of times it's a waste issue or like stormwater runoff issue, wastewater. Most of my work kind of started coming inland, and the Great Lakes is just an awesome place to do what I do. And moving to Canada, there's a lot of freshwater. So I'd say almost all my work right now is freshwater, except for a little bit of marine work in the Arctic. I'm optimistic to a fault, because sometimes I'm like overly optimistic. Yes, I am optimistic about the future. I recognize that there are a lot of hurdles that we need to get over and a lot of things that we need to do. And of course, that it's tricky. But I am optimistic about the future. I think I have to be, right, in order to keep doing what I do every day and, working on these solutions. And I think one of the things that keeps me optimistic is to the students, right? So by nature, you're more optimistic when you're younger. And I think when you get older, you become wiser and sometimes a little more jaded. And so I think young people keep me optimistic, but also working in the community, you can actually see change happen. So I'm definitely motivated by the changes we've seen on the ground to keep going. And I do feel optimistic for the future. And I think there's a lot of things that we've been slow on and people can be really upset about the pace of change we're seeing. But if you also think about the change we've seen, we have done something. We have made changes, right? We just have to push a little bit harder. And I guess for that, I'm thinking of like where we're at with climate change, for example. So I think the first time I got to see change on the ground and feel part of the solution was when it was after my PhD. I was doing my postdoc, and we were starting to understand that there were these tiny bits of plastic in our face wash, the microbeads. And there were people who were trying to push policy to get rid of them. And I was sitting on some research from my PhD that showed that the same type of plastic could be harmful to fish. And I was in a postdoc program that was teaching us a lot about science communication and communicating to government and that type of thing. So I wrote some policy briefs and I started contacting members of government who were relevant. I testified in front of the government committee that was thinking about it. And so I really got to see the policy experience and see how my work could actually inform policy. And we did ban microbeads. I obviously can't say like I did it, but I can say confidently that my work was part of the body of work that informed that change. And that felt really good. And that was almost like addicting. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I can, keep trying to do these little small gains. And so the second one would be with the microfibers. So first we showed that filters trap laundry lint and stop it from going into the environment. And then we worked with a community to get filters into 96 homes in Parry Sound on Lake Huron and showed that the public were okay with cleaning out these filters and that we could actually see a reduction in the wastewater going out to the lake. And then we've been working with Jessica Bell, who's an MPP here in Ontario, and others to try to push to inform these policies that are being written to basically say that if you're a washing machine manufacturer, you have to make it with a filter. So those types of policies that sort of stop, kind of one source of plastic at a time, because there are many. And I don't think you can just turn off the tap all at once. So we do a lot of these types of projects. I think the most fun project we've been doing lately is around cigarette butts. Most people don't know they're made out of plastic. And we had an inkling that this was true. And we thought, well, maybe if they knew that they're throwing plastic on the ground when they throw a cigarette butt on the ground, then maybe they wouldn't. Like most people who throw a cigarette butt on the ground probably wouldn't throw a plastic fork on the ground. So we did like a street smarts type of thing where we worked with the Water Brothers, who are these local filmmakers, and we stopped people on the street and asked them questions in a very kind lighthearted way to try to understand what they knew about cigarette butts and what they were made out of. And only one of like 21 people knew that, of the 21 groups that we interviewed, knew that cigarette butts were made out of plastic. And it was a really fun video. And now we've been kind of showing this like as an art exhibit where we have students that made posters and an artist who made these beautiful baskets out of cigarette butt filters in this video. And right now it's on display at Patagonia. Then it'll go to the aquarium. And that's been a ton of fun. And most people are like, I had no idea that cigarette butts were made out of plastic. So I don't know where that will lead besides maybe behavior change, but those are some examples. And those are the things that keep me optimistic. I read that question in your email. So I guess a few ways. I mean, I don't have a car. I take the subway and walk or bike everywhere. We're pretty careful around both food waste at my house and also waste. And I study waste, and I think my husband is better than I am. We're kind of like crazy about food waste. And then for our actual waste, we've literally had our different neighbors at different times ask us why we never roll our bins down. Sometimes they'll like try to do it for us. And we're like, there's nothing in there. Like, we don't need it taken out every other week. So we just try to be careful not to make a lot of waste. But I will also say that we're not perfect. Like, I'm not a zero waster. I don't live a single-use plastic-free lifestyle. And one of the reasons is because it's expensive. And I have this problem with it costing more money to be more sustainable. And I feel like this is a big part of the solution, is trying to make these things more mainstream instead of kind of these niche expensive things. So we do a lot of things to cut down on our waste, and we do a decent job, but we try not to spend more money to do it, if that makes sense, because we want it to be accessible to everyone. And we're cheap. Yeah, I mean, I think there's many examples where it costs less money, right? Like when you bring a reusable cup to Starbucks or to wherever allows you to bring your coffee cup, they sometimes give you a discount. If you, for example, one of the reasons why our produce isn't wrapped or we don't use a lot of packaging is because we go to a market that sells kind of like the B groceries that are like not the most beautiful fruit, but they're fine. We can save money by not owning a car. So there's lots of ways where it costs less, but there's also a lot of niche ways where it costs more. So for example, deodorant, toothpaste, things like shampoo and conditioner. So if you want to use less plastic around those items, often what you're doing is you're going to a niche store that charges a lot of money for refills, or you're buying kind of expensive like shampoo bars or toothpaste that you put in your mouth and chew and it foams and turns into soap, or deodorant that like it costs 2 times the price, if not more, but is wrapped in cardboard or is in a glass jar and you spread it on yourself. And so it's partially, I think it's because the markets are small. And so companies have to charge more to make money. That's my like charitable response. And I think there's truth in that. But the other part of it is, I think because there is a part of society that they can capitalize off of that are willing to pay more in order to live this type of lifestyle. And so I hope that the markets can grow because that part of society grows and it can become less expensive. But right now, if you go to like a grocery store that has less packaging, 90+% of the time, it's more expensive than a traditional grocery store. Yeah, so I feel really strongly about increasing diversity and giving equal opportunity to people. I feel strongly that one of the most successful ways to do it is by working with children, because I really do feel like you have to have these opportunities young to be able to have that growth in that critical learning stage, and then be able to kind of like, I think we talk a lot about, for example, at my university, about how do we increase diversity within our department. Well, it's hard because most of our applicants it's not a diverse applicant pool yet because we didn't start at the early stage, and it will get there over time maybe. So within the U of T trash team, we work really hard to create these lesson plans and we create them with the youth that we work with at the university. And these are scientists that a lot of them are women that come from multiple diverse backgrounds. And they're the ones that go into the schools and teach the lessons. It's not us that look like older scientists that feel more out of reach. And And so they go into the schools, they teach the lessons, they're free. And we target, as I said earlier, we try to target these model schools. So these are the schools within the city of Toronto that tend to be in your lower income communities. And so the goal there is to be able to go in there and hopefully get kids excited about STEM, get them learning about the issues. And so that's the main way. And then of course I try within my own lab to be equitable about how I, choose students. But I do feel like the work we do in the community and in schools is probably the most impactful way I can pay it forward. And like I said, I think part of that comes from those questions you asked me about, like, most of my mentors come from, for me, people I met in school. Exercise. I run and I swim. I think those are my answers. Yeah, I run and I swim and I talk things through. I definitely do that a lot with my mom and my husband. Yeah. I think it's to try to be optimistic through the tough times and to know that this too shall pass. And then I think the other thing is to use your community, meaning talk to people. I think networking is one of the most important things we can do. And so just getting out of our shells, even when sometimes it feels hard, and talking to people about what they do, about what you want to do, starting to create that network. You never know who's going to give you an opportunity or introduce you to someone who will give you an opportunity. And then the other thing I think is, like, follow your feet and go through doors that seem cracked open that look like good doors you want to go through. I have so many students who sit in my office and they're so afraid to make a decision because they feel like it's the forever decision, but it's never the forever decision. And so it's like, if you have this opportunity, it feels good, take it, try it. If you don't like it, walk away. If you love it, keep going. I think those are my answers. The saying I said earlier, that this too shall pass, I think about that all the time. Like, if I'm struggling, I all the time, this too shall pass. Um, but I think the other thing I think about often is, like, and this helps being older, like, it was harder when I was younger, but when something seems really big and like there's no way you can accomplish this task, just remembering, like, you just start with baby steps. And that I've been in this situation before where I felt like I was going to drop all the balls and it wasn't going to work, and it worked out. So it's just like, just remember, like, this too shall pass and we'll get through this, and, like, do the best you can. I think that's generally the mantra I live by.